I find it intriguing how polarized the youth ministry world becomes when we talk about whether games are effective for reaching kids or not. We've got some people on one hand who are like, games, we've always run games. Heck, we shove marshmallows in a kid's mouth until he pukes or dies. That's the way we've always done it, right? And then you get the opposite approach, which is the games, man. We don't use games. Kids don't even want to play games. Why would you even do games? And you get this kind of almost dogmatic opinion on either side, like the other side is ludicrous. Well, what is it? Who's right? To game or not to game? I've seen it work both ways. I've seen youth ministries that use games and it opens the doors to meaningful conversations about stuff that matters. And I've seen other youth ministries where they're engaging in those conversations without games, and I've seen it work both ways. So here's some thoughts to consider. First of all, the game isn't the end all. The game is just a springboard to conversations about something that matters. A game is just a springboard to something better. I find that games really can break down walls. I used to work with a pretty tough group of kids. I would literally have gang members from opposing gangs sitting at my house. And when we did games, sometimes all of a sudden girls are smearing Cool Whip on a guy's face and they're throwing Cheetos and seeing what sticks. And the same thing would happen every time. Kids are laughing, they're having fun, and for just a brief moment, they would forget about all the baggage they brought in with them. And they would just have a great time and they would relax and laugh. I find that when kids start laughing and when they relax, very often they'll bring that to a small group. And when I divide the small groups and we start talking about stuff, they open up even more. But they also do something else. I find that games also help leaders connect with young people. And here's how. I can think of certain kids that I've mentored and discipled. And as I specifically think of these kids' names and faces, I can remember the first time I connected with them, and it was playing a game of knockout on the basketball court, or it was during a game of dodgeball, because that's where I first connected with them. Games sometimes provide an arena where adults can grab a kid and say, hey, cool, let's do this. I remember grabbing a jock and I remember grabbing this kind of nerdy kid that were both in my small group, and I'm like, come on, let's get Jeff. And during dodgeball, we all grabbed the ball, we went over and we attacked Jeff and made him bleed. Maybe or maybe not, I'm not sure. It was funny though, because months later, I remember this kid that was slightly on the nerdy side coming up to me and saying, hey, remember when we attacked Jeff? It was such a memorable experience for him that it meant something. And it was a place where all of a sudden him and this other kid and all of us together did something together. And you know what? When it came to discussion time and small group time, he opened up a lot better because he had this fun experience. Games sometimes help adults connect with young people. Now, I know some of you guys are saying, Jonathan, you're talking about basketball, you're talking about dodgeball. I can't do either of those things because we're meeting in a living room at a house. I hear you. I started youth ministry in a living room in my own house. And I remember thinking, hey, we can't play dodgeball. There's the lamp that my grandma gave me, you know? And that's where it's frustrating sometimes when you look at like a book with youth ministry games and it's immediately telling you, okay, everybody grab a hockey stick. You can't do that in a living room. That's why we at the source4ym.com, on our free games page, we organize games by venue. Because here's a principle to remember. Games are only as good as their venue. And if you're in a living room, what you really need is an anywhere game, a game that can be played anywhere. That's why if you go on our thesource4ym.com on our games page, you can click on anywhere games. And guess what? If you got an audience full of hundreds of kids, you don't also want to play a game that says, get everybody in a circle. What's that going to look like in an audience? You can't get everybody in a circle, right? So that's why you need audience games. So we have a button that says, click here for audience games. If you want some kids up front doing something funny while the crowd is laughing, that's called an upfront game. So think about this. Certain games are only as good as their venue. Well, guess what? There's another principle about games, and that is that games are often only as good as the person leading the game. Think about this. How many times have you seen someone stand up there and go, all right, it's time for us to play a game. And everybody's like, oh man. And it's lame because the person up there doesn't know how to lead a game. And sometimes, think about it. We allow that student leader that we really want, to be able to start, learning how to manage youth ministry. We give them a chance to go up there and lead a game. Hey guys, let's play a game. Come on, guys, come on. And they don't know how to lead a game. But yet somebody else gets up there and says, okay guys, we're going to divide this right down the middle. You guys are east, you guys are west. I need a representative from each side. Let's go. And before you know it, kids are playing and you're like, well, how did that work? When the other guy who stood up and said, it's time to play a game. Perhaps we should look at that video called The 7 Deadly Sins of Game Leading and learn a little bit about it. Don't have someone up there that doesn't know how to lead games. Here's a final thought. Don't assume that all kids want to play games. And certainly don't force a game when it's not needed. True story. I get a chance to look at lots of different youth ministries in my travels, and I was in this one city and I walked into a room and a lot of good youth ministry stuff was going on. Caring adults were hanging out with kids, meaningful conversations were happening, good stuff. And then the leader walked in the room. And when the leader walked in the room, all of a sudden ministry stopped. And here's why. The leader started organizing this game, and he started grabbing some of his other youth leaders and said, come, help me set up this game. And literally these youth leaders that were engaging with kids, talking, and having a good time, all of a sudden they're like, oh, sorry, I got to go set this up. And ministry stopped so they could set up this game. And then when they started playing the game, kids were like, they didn't even want to play the game. Think about this. Moments before, they were engaging in meaningful conversation. Good stuff was happening. And as soon as the game started, everything stopped. Remember, a game should be a springboard to something better. If you've already got that good thing going, don't stop it with a game that's going to stifle any of that stuff. You guys, games are simply a tool. Games can break down walls. They can build connection between young people and adults. But not every kid wants to play a game. That same story of when I was throwing a dodgeball with a couple other kids and we were attacking Jeff. Well, guess what? My wife was sitting on the sideline with a girl who didn't really want to play games. And you know what? She connected with her and they talked the entire time that we were throwing balls at Jeff. Some kids don't want to play games, and that's okay. The question we need to ask ourselves is, how can we engage kids in meaningful conversations about stuff that matters? Maybe games will be a tool to help you achieve that. Maybe not. You decide.